In recent years, diplomatic ties with China have been undeniably tense. Strained relations have arisen from disputes surrounding the origins of COVID-19, allegations of espionage, and conflicts over Taiwan. However, a notable shift is underway. Chinese President Xi Jinping is actively re-establishing connections with foreign leaders, culminating in his arrival in the United States for the APEC summit and sideline discussions with US President Joe Biden. This development prompts speculation. Is it indicative of a genuine easing of tensions, or is it a case of keeping your friends close but your enemies closer? Sky News Digital Original presents Easing Tensions. Touchdown in California. President Xi arrives in the United States for the first time since 2017, when he met with then-President Donald Trump. But exactly how important is this meeting between Xi and Biden? Are both leaders making amends, or is it a case of keeping your friends close and your enemies closer?
Much more the second. There's too much around China's aggressive use of its intelligence agencies, its military power, its browbeating of US allies like the Philippines in the South China Sea and Japan in the East China Sea, and continued planning to fight and win wars against America and fight a horrific war over Taiwan. Mr. Albanese seemed to be able to put all of that aside and talk about wine and lobsters when he was in Beijing. Joe Biden just can't do that.
I don't dispute the fact that world leaders, even adversarial leaders, should have meetings. We had plenty of them dealing with the Soviet Union through the years, and at times, quite remarkably, they led to some treaty negotiations, particularly dealing with nuclear weapons. But my concern about this has always been the Biden administration's preoccupation with the value of the meetings. In other words, they are under the belief that by playing nice with China, they can actually change their behavior. And it's such a naive position to take. And I think it has a lot to do, frankly, Andrew, with the president. It's kind of old school here in terms of dealing with this and not facing up to the very harsh realities here that China and the United States really are adversaries, and we're not doing a very good job at all of deterring them from their aggressiveness in the region, something the people in Australia see on a regular basis, their aggressiveness against the United States. You know, Andrew, they have intercepted our aircraft and ships 180 times in the last 2 years. That is absolutely exceeds anything that took place in the last decade leading up to that. And that's not to speak of their aggressiveness towards Taiwan and our other allies in the region. And we haven't sanctioned anybody in dealing with that. We have no plan to deter them from that activity. So I'm very concerned that China reads the wrong signals here. And that simply is that the United States leadership is weak. You can take advantage of them. And I think it brings us closer to war when you have that kind of weakness and your adversary is of the belief that the United States leadership is weak and the U.S. is in decline. I think that's kind of where we are.
To tell you the truth, I think China is behaving a little better in the last couple of years. They went on the wrong direction with Australia, and America's picked this up too, that the Chinese diplomacy has taken a more positive attitude about their role. And you're right, the Chinese, and they can't deal with us in the West without us questioning what they do in other places. And vice versa, you know, when they want to take a role in Ukraine, or maybe even in reducing the worst effects of the Gaza war, I mean, we may have to listen to them. And the thing is that this is interesting, Pete, at this APEC thing, which is, of course, one of these great meetings that amounts to nothing, that there's going to be a gala dinner in San Francisco. And the Chinese have invited all the corporate heads in America, plus university professors, or university vice chancellors or presidents, et cetera. So while the United States is trying to work out some kind of a working relationship with China. The Chinese are working the American business community, which is desperate to stay in the China market and, make their billions of dollars. So Americans are a little divided about that. But there's no doubt about it. Politicians and the military in Washington are gearing up for a war one day with China, which I hope never takes place. And of course, China has to understand that we have certain things that we count on and that we value, and they can't go stepping on them, as a matter of fact. And if they do, they're just going to have to pay that kind of price. But you're right. Australia is the meat in the sandwich. There's no doubt about that.
This joint venture is one where one partner is robbed the other one blind. What our intelligence and the facts tell us is that a rising China has been built on the intellectual property theft and economic and military espionage in the trillions of dollars over the years. And, this just really underscores that Joe Biden and this administration has been soft on China, just as they've been soft everywhere with all of our adversaries, Iran and Russia. China's advanced around the globe. Their positions have improved since Joe Biden has been president, and it's why China will be working to influence and interfere the election in 2024. They want Joe Biden to continue to be a weak U.S. president.
If you've been monitoring Chinese state media, particularly the military media, you'll find that in recent weeks, they've started to tone down the nature of their dialogue in terms of hostility towards the U.S. to finding some kind of military rapprochement. Is that a signal that China is willing to start a whole new era and begin a new conversation? Far too soon to tell.
Amid the ongoing conflict in Israel, President Xi's visit to the United States stands at a crucial juncture in global geopolitics. While President Biden has firmly rebuked Hamas and reiterated support for Israel's efforts to secure the release of hostages, President Xi's stance on the matter has been less explicit, raising questions about China's position in the complex Middle East dynamics. The world is watching the conflict unfold in the Middle East, and Beijing has refused to condemn the Hamas atrocities. What message does the meeting send at this time?
Well, I think that's an excellent observation about one of the big strategic differences between the US and China. Xi Jinping is siding with Putin in his war in Ukraine, and China is encouraging Iran and its terrorist proxies Hezbollah and Hamas with the unfolding conflict we see in the Middle East. So China is desperately trying to portray the US as to blame for both the Putin's war in Ukraine and Hamas's war against Israel. And that is something that Joe Biden obviously cannot countenance. So that's going to play into this meeting, and it's not going to help have a warm and friendly dialogue.
What impact will this meeting have on the situation in the Middle East?
I don't think it will have any impact at all on the situation in the Middle East. Xi Jinping is not going to come around to Biden's line of thinking and condemn the murderous Hamas terrorist attacks. He's going to continue to think that it helps China with the global south and with Arab states in the Middle East to side with Hamas. And on the Ukraine war, it's the same story. Any idea that China has an interest in brokering a peace deal instead of just siding with Xi's strategic partner, Vladimir Putin, is just simply wrong.
China and Russia have been historical enemies. So this is a marriage of convenience or inconvenience, this unlimited relationship. And just how much China is supplying munitions to Russia is an unknown. It seems North Korea is providing more artillery shells to Russia right now than China. But obviously that couldn't happen without China's acquiescence. So look, at the end of the day, Biden's a more important partner or adversary for President Xi than Vladimir Putin ever will be. And so on the note that you're talking about in terms of potential conflicts, America is really obsessed about talking about deconfliction, particularly in the South China Sea. When our planes are flying through, your planes can't bother us. Same with our ships. One of the key things that the US is seeking to come out of this meeting, and like we said, this is just a talk. Yes, there's been lots of talks by public servants and experts leading into it, but this is just a chat. One of the key things we're hoping is to re-establish what in the old days we called the red phone. When there's a crisis between Washington, D.C. and Beijing, there's a red phone that the president can pick up, and he knows that the Chinese president will answer. And they want military-to-military communications. The new chairman of the Joint Chiefs has made significant outreach to his Chinese counterpart. It's about deconflicting. We might move in the same skies and the same seas, but we don't want an accident leading to something bigger.
Well, look, I think the primary concern of the U.S. President Biden, going into this was the risk of unintended escalation. The focus that we heard from the Chinese President Xi on Taiwan is probably the leading concern the United States has about a risk of a conflagration or the expansion of these military tensions to actual actions, so from kind of more of a Cold War, if you will, to something hotter. So again, communications are essential. That's the classic Churchillian notion that jaw is better than war. The focus of the Chinese president tells you that the underlying concerns have not gone away. Just hopefully we'll be a little bit better in managing them as a result of a willingness at least to address them.
That business, it is the right objective to have. They've never had that objective before. It's always been in the past to destroy some of their infrastructure, kill as many leaders as they could and fighters, and then get out as quickly as they could before there was widespread international condemnation of the civilian casualties that were taking place, largely because Hamas offers up those civilians to be casualties. But this time the military aim is very different. It's going to take some time. And if they don't accomplish the mission, they know full well now that if they don't dismantle Hamas, if they don't take the network down and its effectiveness as a terrorist organization and a military organization, and certainly as a governing body as well, then they're going to come back. They'll reset and reattack. And they know that, and that's why this military aim is so different, and it has to be accomplished. And that's the reality of it. And they are about doing that. We're watching this at the think tank I chair, Institute for the Study of War, and they're being very deliberate about what they do. But yes, they're taking the tunnel complexes down. They've taken down hundreds of miles of those. And certainly the other objective they have in mind is to get all the hostages back at some point.
The relationship is not just vital, but wielded with calculated power by the Chinese Communist Party, exerting influence over economies like America and Australia on a global scale. As a major trading partner, China's extensive imports and exports play a pivotal role in shaping a country's economy. Any disruptions or tensions in these diplomatic ties carry the potential for far-reaching and severe economic consequences. These are two very powerful countries, especially when it comes to economic ties. How important are these ties for the broader geopolitical landscape?
Economic ties have been proven throughout human history to not prevent conflict. Economists tell everybody that economic interconnections are a way of preventing war, but World War I tells us that's not true. World War II tells us that's not true. And the idea that Vladimir Putin was going to not attack Ukraine because of sanctions and economic consequences is obviously not true. So I'm not a believer in the stabilizing effects of economic independence, but I do see China using its economic power coercively, and that's why the US and every advanced economy on the planet is de-risking its level of economic engagement with China. Australia is lonely in seeming to want to get back the economic dependence that China forced us to reduce.
My gut, and from the people I'm talking to, is that was just a god-awful cock-up by the Chinese. They never meant that spy balloon to head that way, but it did. Did the Chinese launch it? Yeah. Was that their intention? No. So on that one, I would say President Biden has President Xi on the back foot going, sorry. I mean, look, to make my point, President Xi visited a few years ago here into the States, and, you know, he's an old communist tractor driver. There are photographs of President Xi in the Midwest driving a tractor with an American farmer. And that just resurfaced on Chinese state media. So maybe, you know, and don't forget, superconductors and microchips will be a key part of this conversation. But are there signals that they're ready to finally start talking? We won't know.
Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's recent visit to China holds immense significance as it marks a pivotal moment in diplomatic relations between the two nations. The trip provided an opportunity for constructive dialogue on numerous issues. The outcomes of this visit could potentially shape the geopolitical landscape in the Asia-Pacific. On Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's visit to China, what does that say about Australia's relationship with President Xi?
Well, I think President Xi will be scratching his head about the visit because it all seems too good to be true. Mr. Albanese seems to be taking the party-to-party relationship way too seriously, you know, standing in the footsteps of Gough Whitlam, who met Xi's predecessor, Chairman Mao, and seems not to have carried any of the ideas from his Washington visit into the Beijing visit. So I think what it tells us is there's an air of unreality about this current phase of the Australia-China relationship. And I think we'll see some contrasts in the US-China relationship that make us think again.
Looking ahead at the US and China relationship, you don't see it improving after this meeting?
No, I don't. There's too many structural interests colliding for that to happen. Joe Biden and the next US president will probably not agree about many things, unless, of course, it's Joe Biden again. But something that unites American politics and the American population is an understanding of the aggressive nature of China and the intrusive, coercive way it operates its economy. And that is a foundation for US policy and action in the world. And for Xi, he's closing the Chinese economy while saying he wants foreign investment. He's controlling the Chinese population, and he's using Chinese power aggressively in the world. That is not the basis for a friendly, stable relationship. It's the basis for a wary, competitive, strategic relationship.
Underlying concerns that China has about the United States or that the United States have about China have not been resolved. There has been some progress. I mean, obviously from a U.S. perspective, in terms of current U.S. democracy and domestic politics, there's real concern about Chinese industrial support for the manufacturing of fentanyl, a precursor drug that has really been at the root of some really difficult problems with drug addiction in the United States. There seems to have been some progress on that. There's some progress on confidence-building measures and communications, but you know the underlying questions about China's intent in the region and Chinese skepticism, similarly, about U.S. intent in the region remains. So just again, no resolution in sight, not warm and cuddly, not happy days are here again, but certainly better today than it was a week ago because you in tense situations need to talk more, not less.
If you found this production informative, then please like, subscribe and share this video. We also want to hear your thoughts on the issue, so leave a comment below before you click off the page. I'm Gabriella Power from Sky News Australia. Thank you for watching.